a better place to be than the market for alternative cryptocurrencies is Bitcoin. Consequently, I have decided to maintain the majority of my cryptocurrency portfolio invested in Bitcoin rather than altcoins, since I believe that altcoins are likely to continue to lose ground to Bitcoin. It is okay to me that the price of Bitcoin may decrease. With that being said, I am not terribly concerned about Bitcoin, even if it does go lower, so long as the 50-week simple moving average SMA continues to hold as support anytime it is challenged, regardless of whether it is tested again in the third quarter or the fourth quarter or any other time. As long as it continues to serve as a support, then, I'm not really calling into doubt the legitimacy of the bull market. Every time something breaks, that is certainly the moment when you realize that the question or the integrity more so comes into doubt. Benjamin Cohen is one of the few people who believe that Bitcoin has a significantly greater potential for growth than alternative cryptocurrencies at the moment. Now, in general, a lot of what I talk about on this channel is talking about, of course, XRP and the benefits that it does offer. This is the case as well. But I do believe that it is important to at least listen to what Benjamin Cohen has to say about Bitcoin and altcoins and what he believes is going to be happening in the market. This is because I like to get the perspective of people who might not agree with me, in the hopes of possibly acquiring more information that I did not have the opportunity to acquire in the past. We spend a lot of time watching Raoul Pal on this channel. Additionally, Ralph Pal is quoted as saying that he is of the opinion that XRP altcoins such as Solana and a great number of other cryptocurrencies have a very good possibility of performing exceptionally well in the third and fourth quarters of 2025. The viewpoint that Benjamin Cohen brings to the table is distinct, and he does make extensive use of technical analysis in order to provide this information to us. Consequently, what I am going to do is I am going to listen to what Benjamin Cohen has to say today in the video that is being presented to you today. I am going to show you this, and then I am going to also kind of break it down and give you guys reasons as to why I believe he is correct or wrong in specific different areas. Additionally, I believe that it is going to be a really helpful film for each and every one of you people today. Also, I ask that you watch it all the way through. Not only is it going to be a little bit different, but I also believe that it is going to be productive in the end. To ensure that this video is viewed by all members of the XRP army, I ask that you please hit the like button. So let's get down to business. At the tune of around 7%, actually had a fantastic rise back up to the tune of last week. We are not exactly at all-time highs just yet, but we are also not that far away from having reached them. In the present moment, you can observe that Bitcoin is now trading at around $18,000, $108 and $109,000. When compared to the previous all-time highs, this is not too far away. The bull market support band, which comprises of the 20-week simple moving average and the 21-week exponential moving average, extends from around 95.6K to approximately 98.4K. Since the beginning of May, Bitcoin has, as you probably well know, remained for the most part close to its previous highs. As far as I'm aware, the price action hasn't really done a whole lot of anything. There has been a slight increase in our price as well as a slight decrease. Nevertheless, the bull market sports band has really increased in value. However, what is really interesting is that this cycle, the 50-day simple moving average, has actually been a much better sort of harbinger of the bull market than the bull market where you can see that there have been a few instances where Bitcoin went below the bull market sweep band. These instances occurred in the third quarter of 2023 and the third quarter of 2024, and then it did so again, but this time in the first quarter and early in the second quarter of 2025. If Bitcoin were to drop to the 50-week simple moving average in the third quarter of the year as it did in the previous two quarters, there is still a good chance that it would bounce off of that level and come right back up. However, the question that needs to be asked is whether or not Bitcoin will repeat this pattern in which it experiences a pullback below the bull market support band in the third quarter of the year. On the other hand, if it did that, it would most likely result in altcoins being quite a little diminished. In addition, there is always the possibility that Bitcoin will not do that and will rather see an increase during the third quarter of the year, right? There is always a possibility that it makes that happen. In point of fact, if you take a look at the monthly returns for Bitcoin and just take a look at the year 2017, you will see that Bitcoin really increased in the months of July and August of that year. Although it did have a retreat in the third quarter, it actually increased to a much higher level, right? There was a retreat to a price that was higher than where the month of July began. It was a pullback. I just wanted to provide that update, and if you guys remember back in the first quarter, we said that the next rally, the death cross rally, could lead to a higher high, a new all-time high, as long as Bitcoin does not go below the 2024 high. So it is certainly not out of the question that you see something like that occur. However, I just wanted to provide that update. The fact that the all-time high till that point was reached on the day that I believe the golden cross occurred is something that is incredibly intriguing. Do you agree? The day of the death cross would be considered the lowest point, while the day of the golden cross would be considered the highest point. Once more demonstrating to you that the name of the measure that you are now examining seems to imply that the opposite was going to take place. At this juncture, I would suggest that the bull market continue to maintain its integrity so long as the 50-day simple moving average SMA continues to serve as support. In point of fact, you can see that a significant number of the previous cycles persisted so long as the $50 mark was maintained as a support level. It marked the end of the cycle anytime the 50-day simple moving average SMA broke, although that has not yet occurred in current cycle. It is somewhat comparable to the notion. It is an observation that is comparable, but it is not exactly the same thing, but it is comparable to the 200-day simple moving average observation, right? This discovery is based on the fact that Bitcoin's previous peaks have generally occurred around the time when the 200-day simple moving average of Bitcoin crosses the previous all-time high. The first exhibit is A, followed by exhibit B, and finally exhibit C. On the other hand, you have to be aware that in the most recent cycle, it actually took place a couple of months after the peak, if you will. Okay, but the two cycles that came before that one were virtually exactly timed in terms of when the 200-day estimate crossed over the all-time high. At that time, the top was in the second to last cycle. If it had been there, it would have been a couple of months late. It is possible that it will fail to meet it once again during this cycle. However, there are a few other observations that can be made about the cycle based on some of these pretty simple things, such as the 200-day simple moving average and the 50-day moving average, right? To the extent that we continue to have weekly closes that are higher than that, and so on and so forth, the bull market will continue to maintain its integrity, right? And the 50 that we are estimating right now is somewhere around 86,000, correct? In other words, if there is a retreat later on in the third quarter, then ideally that level will have the ability to hold. Additionally, if it does, there is a considerable likelihood that the subsequent higher low will subsequently lead to another higher high. This is the case if it does. It was exactly the same as the one that we recently got. To put it another way, even at this very now, there is no evidence to suggest that it is impossible for it to reach a new all-time high, or to put it another way, a new cycle high in the month of July. The pullbacks that we see in Bitcoin throughout the third quarter often take place around the month of August, right? What I mean is that this dip below the bull markings that had been in 2023 took place in the month of August. Additionally, the one that took place the previous year took place in late July or early August, but there was a kind of second one that took place in the month of July. Additionally, if you take a look at the year 2023, you will notice that Bitcoin saw a significant surge in price, after which it remained quite stable for a period of time and continued to climb to new all-time highs. Furthermore, the vulnerability that was introduced did not become apparent until the month of August occurred. In point of fact, the Bitcoin market is a more favorable place to be than the alternative cryptocurrency